Welcome, nice to have your company, filling in for Bridie Barry, who is on assignment this week. As we mentioned earlier in the programme, Network 10 vowing to try and take a portion of that critical breakfast ad market in 2013, following its failed foray into breakfast. James Manning, editor and publisher of Mediaweek, in Melbourne this week with a special guest, because James, the microscope now turning on ad revenues. What's the future looking like?
Look, it's. I think it's going to be under a bit of pressure for quite a while. There was this year's sort of forecasts were sort of didn't look too bad, and I think we might throw in our next guest here, Chris Nolan, Starcom Mediavest, mate. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now you run something every year called the Starcom Media Ventures. What do we?
Media Futures.
Media Futures. That's
right.
It. Now you had to revise that mid-year, didn't you?
We did.
Perhaps a little bit ambitious last year.
We were.
Mid-year, you said we might be looking at ad growth of about 1.3% this year.
That's right.
That'll end up sort of about where we're at, do you think?
Look, it could even be flat.
Oh, really?
I think we had a 1.3, which was our mid-year projection, but the reality is now it looks like to be a flat year.
Right.
For advertising growth.
Yeah. You probably know this is a survey. You get these figures by doing a survey. You go out and talk to the marketing people at the biggest advertisers in the country, correct?
That's right, and the media vendors as well.
Okay. Now you're probably already underway talking to them about next year, I guess.
We are.
What's your, without sort of giving the game away, because you released that I think in December. By
January the results were released.
What are you feeling for next year? Do you think we might be looking at flat again, or?
Look, I think there's a very pessimistic view until we get an election result for next year. If you look at consumer confidence at the moment, which is a very strong lead indicator to sales advertising performance, it's still flat. It's below the peak we had in 2010 and the peaks we had pre-recession. So there's nothing to indicate a bounce back in the advertising market as yet. So we're projecting flat growth for next year.
Okay. Now, we just heard Michelle from Roy Morgan talking about newspapers and magazines. What's the agency view on newspaper survival? I mean, we've talked to people and they still like it. They say they can get a big bang, especially at retail, by, you know, a big campaign in papers. But it must be starting to get hard to keep investing at the rate you've done in the past.
Well, look, to underscore Michelle's point, the Age at its peak was read by 1.3 million viewers. Today, across the print, online, iPad and phone application, as many as 2 million people are engaging with that masthead each day. So the audience is still there. As Michelle quite correctly said, it's about those newspapers developing a new commercial model. But from an advertiser's perspective, the trend towards these online assets is good news. They provide a very strong engagement with our audience and much more accountability than we've ever had in the traditional print space.
Yep. And just on the magazines too, it's been a pretty tough year for magazines in ad revenue, but they seem to have a pretty good, you know, they're probably holding on to print maybe a little bit stronger than the newspapers have been. But where's the money that used to flow there going? Is it people holding on to it, or are they putting a bit more into digital? Or?
There's a number of factors. I think, you know, TV's had a good time of it, really, with the emergence of the new digital channels. That's helped TV become cheaper. It's helped attract new advertisers to their medium and helped steal some share, you know, from media such as magazines. Obviously, also there's a trend to online as well for some of the advertisers that were in the magazine space. And what we're seeing now is both Pac Pubs and ACP, now owned by Bauer, getting more aggressive in you know, developing their digital assets. You know, we've seen them both. Obviously, Bauer this year launched their augmented reality capability, which really helps the reader extend into the digital space. And I think that will deliver more accountability and more engagement from the reader, and that's good news for the advertisers.
A couple of quick thoughts from you too. We've been talking about free-to-air television. The commentary this week, advertisers have said, look, they really would like to see 3 strong free-to-air players out there in the marketplace. Bit of chat about one of them falling over, but it seems a bit premature to me. What do you think?
Oh, look, we think 3 will survive. The prospects for TV are for modest growth over the next 10 years. You know, that'll take the TV industry out to a $4 billion industry. I think some restructuring needs to occur, but as you earlier said, I think 10 have got a good plan to improve their performance into next year and be a stronger competitor again.
Yeah. Now, this week we've seen the Media Eye as a group of guys who run information and news with the MFA, the
Yes.
sort of organisation of all the media buyers. They've had their Sales Representatives of the Year awards, or sales execs. Are these the sort of foot soldiers of the media business, mate?
Well, we're all hardworking. They're certainly some of the hardest, and look, a very competitive market. So, you know, the salespeople underscore the performance of the media vendors. So, and well done to Media too, who were given the national award.
Yeah, they did very well. I think Nine also did very well out there. There was good representation of some other people like Fairfax, News, most of the big players were there, Southern Cross or Stereo. Those outdoor companies always seem to do quite well in them. Do they have anything that sets their sort of media salespeople apart? Or have they got to work a bit harder so they're not sort of associated with content in their place?
Well, I think we've seen some innovation in the outdoor selling. We've got better measurement capability in the medium now, and there's more innovation in terms of outdoor starting to take on some, you know, digital capability as well. So I think that, along with, you know, just a real investment in it, it's a very competitive marketplace, has allowed them to do well.
Great. All right, Chris Nolan, Stark on Mediaweek. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Back to you, Carson.
James, thanking you for that one, and let's just move on from all that, shall we? Because bring across some of the other stories in media circles this week, shall we not? Fairfax Media in the United States is offloading some assets to the tune of just under 80 million. That's an interesting one, James, because timing and price. What was the market expecting relative to what they've netted?
Yeah, I think that most commentary seems to be they think that was a pretty good figure. These are assets. I think they paid about 60 million for them. They got 80 15 years later. It's not huge capital growth, but gee, if you get your money back and then some in this market. It was picked up by some private equity people in the US, so they had an eye for a bargain. And interesting, private equity is still not shy of jumping on the media when there's something they think worth buying.
Said this has got the fingerprints of Ms. Reinhardt all over it, that she pressured Mr. Corbett to make a play and get this signed and sealed. Are you believing that that is actually some influence now finally showing through from a cornerstone investor?
Gee, no, I don't know if you could read that much into it. It's, you know, it's a nice little asset, but 80 million, you know, it's at the end of the year, you look at their whole turnover, it's not going to make a huge difference.
No doubt about, though. I mean, let's not forget that board meeting, though, where her representatives said you've got to pay down debt, you've got to sell assets as part of that, right?
Oh, absolutely. And look, they tried to get rid of the radio, but it just didn't get the monies that they wanted. Whether they'll ever revisit that again, I'm not sure. And yeah, sure, there could well be some further asset sales. People are talking about some of their assets in New Zealand, probably really not related to their core business. They could be also on the block.
All right, there's more to Gina on this show than just Gina, at least. Let's talk about the Media Eye Awards. Sales reps, sometimes the unsung heroes, right? But actually, when you think about the amount of coffee they consume and all of that, they are clearly linchpins, are they not? This is a high-pressured role, and now tell me who's come to the fore.
Yeah, we just had a quick mention about that with Chris down here. And yeah, Nine did very well. And we talked about the outdoor companies that did very well. And yeah, and if you're running a business like a free-to-air TV or radio, you're giving all your content away, so you've really got to monetize it. And those salespeople out there in the field are absolutely crucial.
An annual conference and an awards night this week to do with film and TV production. What are you going to be looking for? That's SPA, the Screen Producers Association of Australia. They all get together once a year and sort of talk about what they sort of want to put to the government. It's a very strong body for the screen producers. They lobby the government on their behalf. They get tax breaks, which help productions get up. So the main things they're asking of the government these days, they want some better funding assistance. I think at the moment, TV productions get a 20%, they call it an offset tax break. Films get 40%, so the TV producers would like to see that boosted at least to equal of what their colleagues in the film sector get. And they want to see some content regulations. There's already some for the main primary free-to-air channels, but they'd like to see those applied across the digital channels, which I think at the moment aren't governed by that, and new players on different platforms. If we wanted to start up an internet broadcasting business, for example, there's no rules governing what we wouldn't have to play any Australian content. The film producers and the TV producers would really like to see some regulation there. let's move away from that. Another awards night, GQ Man of the Year. Quite refreshing in terms of, I'm sure there's no politics involved in that. There's no sort of budgie smuggler kind of traces to be found. Basically, what features at that moment in time?
Yeah, Chris Hemsworth was the man there who got the gong for GQ Man of the Year. It's one of the sort of success stories, if you like, of that men's magazine sector, which has been under a lot of pressure. That's sort of the high end of the market, if you like. Luxury advertisers like to go in magazines like GQ, and it's their big night of the year. Really pushes their brand out, gets their name out to a lot of places. They attract a bit of sponsorship, so they actually make a few dollars on the night as well, I think.
James, we have 60 seconds to talk ratings for week 45, free to air. Let's bring up the charts. You walk me through, if you will.
Okay, yeah, we'll see a couple of things we mentioned briefly last week. I think Melbourne Cup and Big Brother both featuring right up to the top there. Big Brother's ended. The one big reality show to come is X Factor, which will end next week.
All right, and subscription TV, brief foray into that league, A-League, Sydney v Melbourne.
Yeah.
Modern Family in at number 5, in amongst it all as well. What, Grand Designs Australia?
Yep, absolutely. Specialist programming to the network. And look, that A-League remains the big story of almost the second half of the year for subscription TV. Those size of those audiences are really impressive, and free-to-air is going to want to get a piece of that action sooner or later.
James, I want to thank you so much for all of that. As always, value your contribution immeasurably.
Great talking to you, Carsten. Thank you.
All right. And that's where we find ourselves. Bridie is back in the chair. Big sighs of relief for you next week. Thanks for your company.